A world of ice and shadows. The relentless wind howled across the barren, icy plains of Exon 5, a desolate planet at the fringes of a dying star system. The sky glimmered with faint auroras, their cold light doing little to pierce the endless night. In the heart of this frozen wasteland, a lone figure trudged onward. A young alien named Velaria. Her pale violet skin shimmered faintly against the frost-laden terrain, and her translucent cloak billowed like a ghost behind her. Valeria's home was a mere memory now, destroyed in a conflict she had barely escaped. At just 17 solar cycles old, she had been left to wander Exon 5 with nothing but her wits and a dwindling hope for survival. Her journey was one of necessity. Her people, the Sithar, had retreated to a hidden sanctuary, but Velaria was deemed too frail to make the journey. The bitter truth stung worse than the biting winds. She had been abandoned to die. The faint hum of her survival bracelet reminded her of the urgency of her situation. Its built-in scanner flickered with distress signals from the planet's surface, but she knew better than to trust the chaotic environment of Exon 5. Creatures lurked in the perpetual frost, and even the terrain itself was known to shift unpredictably. Just as she was about to stop and rest, the scanner pulsed brighter, picking up something unusual, a signal that didn't match any known Sithar technology. Valeria's heart pounded. Could it be another species? A rescue ship? Her thin fingers trembled as she adjusted the device, locking onto the source. It wasn't far, just over the next ridge. Gritting her teeth, she summoned the last of her strength and began the climb. As she reached the crest, her breath caught in her throat. Below, nestled in the snow, was a spacecraft unlike any she had ever seen. Its metallic surface shimmered with intricate patterns, some scorched and broken as though it had survived a catastrophic event. Smoke hissed from its fractured engines, and faint lights blinked erratically along its hull. Cautiously, Velaria descended toward the ship, each step crunching in the frost. As she approached, a hatch groaned open, releasing a puff of steam. Her heart raced as a figure emerged, a human. The man was clad in a worn survival suit, its patches betraying years of use. His dark, weary eyes locked onto Velaria, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other. The human raised his hand, palm open, a universal gesture of peace. "Hello," he said, his voice carrying both caution and curiosity. Velaria hesitated before replying in her native tongue. The translation chip in her bracelet worked instantly, converting her words into the human's language. "Who are you?" The man stepped forward cautiously. "Captain Aiden Cross, of the Earth vessel Resolute. We crashed here. And you?" Velaria glanced around, unsure whether to trust this stranger. "Velaria, I am alone. My people left." Aiden frowned, his expression softening as he took in the frail girl before him. "This place is dangerous. My crew and I could use help, if you're willing." The words hung in the frigid air. Valeria's instincts told her to retreat, to stay hidden and fend for herself. But something in Aiden's tone, a mix of desperation and sincerity, stirred her curiosity. Against her better judgment, she nodded. "I know a shelter nearby," she said. "Follow me." Aiden turned and signaled to his crew, who cautiously emerged from the ship. There were 6 of them in total, their movements slow and wary in the alien environment. Velaria noted their diversity, different heights, skin tones, and expressions that spoke of their individuality. They were nothing like her people, yet their collective strength was palpable. As the group followed Velaria through the snow, the wind began to pick up, carrying with it an ominous growl. Aiden stiffened, his hand instinctively resting on the sidearm at his belt. "What is that?" he asked, his voice low. Velaria glanced over her shoulder, her eyes wide with fear. "The frost beasts," she whispered. "We must hurry." The humans exchanged uneasy glances but quickened their pace. Velaria led them toward a series of caves carved into a jagged mountainside. She gestured for them to enter as the growling grew louder, now accompanied by the sound of crunching ice. Once inside, Velaria helped them stack loose rocks to block the entrance. As the last stone was placed, a deafening roar echoed through the cavern. The frost beasts had arrived, their massive silhouettes visible against the faint glow of the auroras outside. Aiden drew his weapon, but Velaria shook her head. "They can't see us," she whispered, "but if they hear us." The group held their breath as the creatures prowled outside, their claws scraping against the icy ground. For what felt like hours, the humans and Velaria remained silent, the only sound their shallow breathing. Finally, the frost beasts moved on, their growls fading into the distance. Aiden exhaled and turned to Velaria. "Thank you," he said quietly. "We owe you our lives." Velaria shrugged, though her heart was still racing. "You'll need more than thanks to survive here." Aiden chuckled softly, his expression a mix of exhaustion and admiration. "Then I guess it's good we have you." In that moment, Velaria realized something unexpected. For the first time since her people had abandoned her, she wasn't alone. And as she looked around at the group of strange yet determined humans, she felt a flicker of hope that together they might survive the unforgiving world of Exon 5. Forging bonds in the ice, the chill of Exon 5 seeped through the walls of the cavern as the humans huddled close to their salvaged heaters. Velaria watched them from the shadows, her violet eyes studying their every movement. These humans were unlike anything she had imagined, both vulnerable and resilient. Despite their grim situation, they exchanged quiet jokes, their camaraderie cutting through the oppressive silence of the cave. It was a stark contrast to her own people, who valued logic over emotion and rarely wasted time on laughter. Captain Aiden Cross sat with his back against the cave wall, his weapon resting within arm's reach. He glanced over at Velaria and nodded, inviting her closer. "You don't have to stay over there," he said gently. "We're all in this together now." Velaria hesitated but stepped closer, taking the seat near the humans. One of them, a short woman with sandy hair and a kind smile, offered her a ration bar. Velaria accepted it cautiously, sniffing the foreign food before taking a small bite. The flavor was bland but oddly satisfying, and she nodded her thanks. "We should introduce ourselves," the woman said, breaking the awkward silence. "I'm Lieutenant Sarah Banks, the ship's engineer. This is Dr. Malik Patel, our medic." She gestured to a tall, slender man who gave Velaria a brief nod. "And over there is Ensign Jonah Clark, our communications officer." Jonah waved, his boyish grin momentarily brightening the gloomy cave. "Nice to meet you, Velaria. Thanks for not letting us freeze out there." Valeria's gaze shifted to the others. Two more humans remained silent, their expressions guarded. Sarah noticed her hesitation and added, "That's Sergeant Marcus Ward, our weapons specialist, and Corporal Elise Torres. They're not much for small talk, but they mean well." Marcus grunted, his stern face betraying no emotion, while Elise simply nodded, her sharp eyes scanning the cave's interior. "And you've already met me," Aiden said with a small smile. "Captain Aiden Cross, at your service." Velaria tilted her head, unsure how to respond. "Your crew, you seem close," she said finally. "Is that common among humans?" Sarah chuckled. "Not always, but in situations like this, it helps to stick together. Keeps us sane." Valeria's expression softened. Her own people had emphasized survival over connection, a philosophy that had left her isolated and abandoned. The warmth she saw among the humans was unfamiliar but strangely comforting. The perilous hunt. As the night wore on, the group realized their supplies wouldn't last long. The harsh conditions of Exon 5 required a steady source of food and warmth, both of which were in short supply. Velaria stepped forward, her voice firm. "I can guide you to food. There's a type of moss that grows in the ice caverns nearby. It's not much, but it's edible." Aiden nodded. "We'll need more than that, but it's a start. Marcus, Jonah, you're with me. Velaria, lead the way." The four of them ventured into the icy labyrinth, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Velaria moved with ease, her familiarity with the terrain evident in every step. Aiden and his men, on the other hand, struggled to navigate the slippery ground, their boots crunching on the frost. The group eventually reached a cavern illuminated by faintly glowing moss. Velaria knelt and began gathering the substance, showing the humans how to do the same. Jonah held up a handful and grimaced. "We're really eating this." "It's better than starving," Marcus replied gruffly, stuffing the moss into a pouch. As they worked, a low rumble echoed through the cave. Velaria froze, her eyes widening in alarm. Something's coming. Aiden drew his weapon, his stance tense. "What is it?" Velaria didn't answer. Instead, she gestured for them to move deeper into the cavern, her voice barely above a whisper. "Quickly, hide." The group pressed themselves against the jagged walls as the rumble grew louder, accompanied by the sound of claws scraping against stone. A massive creature emerged from the shadows, its translucent hide shimmering like ice. Its eyes glowed a pale blue, and its jagged teeth glinted in the faint light. Velaria whispered urgently, "An ice predator. It hunts by sound." The humans remained still, their breaths shallow. Aiden tightened his grip on his weapon, but Velaria shook her head. "Don't. It's too strong. We have to wait." The predator sniffed the air, its massive head turning in their direction. Velaria closed her eyes, her heart pounding. The humans beside her stayed silent, their fear palpable. After what felt like an eternity, the creature turned away and lumbered deeper into the cave. Only when the sound of its footsteps faded did Velaria let out a shaky breath. "It's gone." Aiden exhaled and holstered his weapon. "We need to be more careful." "Thanks for the warning, Velaria." The group hurriedly gathered the remaining moss and made their way back to the main cave, their steps quicker and more cautious than before. New plans, new bonds. Back at the shelter, the group shared their findings and discussed their next steps. The food they had gathered was enough to sustain them for a few days, but it was clear they needed a long-term solution. Aiden turned to Velaria. "You've lived here your whole life. What else can we use to survive?" Velaria thought for a moment before replying. "There's a thermal spring not far from here. The water is warm enough to keep us alive, and the area around it is rich in resources. But it's dangerous." "How dangerous?" Marcus asked, his tone skeptical. "Predators, unstable ground, and storms," Velaria said. "But it's our best chance." Aiden nodded, his expression resolute. "Then we'll move there. We don't have a choice." As the humans prepared for the journey, Velaria found herself drawn to their determination. Despite the odds, they refused to give up, a trait she had rarely seen among her own people. For the first time, she began to wonder if her survival wasn't just luck, but the start of something greater. The journey to the springs. The icy winds howled relentlessly as the group began their trek toward the thermal springs. The terrain was treacherous, with jagged ice formations jutting out like frozen blades, and the snow beneath their feet often gave way to hidden crevices. Velaria led the way, her familiarity with Exon 5's dangers guiding the humans through paths they would never have found on their own. Aiden kept pace beside her, his eyes scanning the horizon for threats. Behind them, Sarah carried a bundle of supplies salvaged from the wrecked ship, while Marcus and Elise guarded the rear with their weapons at the ready. Jonah and Dr. Patel walked in the middle, their lighter frames making it easier to navigate the uneven ground. "Are we close?" Jonah asked, his voice strained from the cold. Velaria glanced back at him, her breath visible in the freezing air. "Not far. The springs are at the base of that ridge." She pointed to a jagged outcropping in the distance, steam faintly visible rising from its base. "But we must hurry. The storms here are unpredictable." As if on cue, dark clouds began to gather overhead, blotting out what little light the auroras provided. The wind picked up, carrying with it a bitter chill that bit through their layered clothing. The storm strikes. The first flakes of snow fell gently, but within minutes, the storm intensified. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and the howling wind drowned out their voices. Velaria turned to Aiden, shouting to be heard. "We need to find shelter. The springs are too far." Aiden nodded, his expression grim. He signaled to the others to stop, but the storm had already scattered them across the icy expanse. Panic surged through the group as they realized they couldn't see one another. "Stay together," Aiden yelled, his voice barely audible over the wind. "Find each other and regroup." Velaria grabbed his arm, her voice urgent. "There's a fissure nearby. It leads to a cavern. We can wait out the storm there." Aiden didn't hesitate. He relayed the message to the others through their comm devices, guiding them toward Valeria's location. One by one, the humans stumbled through the snow, their faces pale with cold and fear. Sarah was the last to arrive, her arms clutching the salvaged supplies tightly. "This better be close," Marcus growled, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Velaria led them toward the fissure, her sharp eyes picking out the faint landmarks she had memorized long ago. When they finally reached the narrow opening, Aiden gestured for everyone to enter. The humans squeezed through the gap, their bulky suits scraping against the icy walls. Inside, the cavern was dark, but mercifully quiet, the howling wind muffled by layers of rock and ice. Velaria ignited a small bioluminescent plant she had carried, casting a faint blue glow across the group. The humans collapsed onto the ground, shivering and exhausted. "We'll rest here," Aiden said, his tone firm but reassuring. "Good work, Velaria." Discoveries in the dark. As the group settled in, Velaria explored the cavern, her curiosity outweighing her exhaustion. The walls were lined with crystalline formations that glimmered faintly in the light of her plant. She reached out to touch one, marveling at its warmth. "This isn't ordinary ice," she muttered to herself. Aiden noticed her interest and walked over. "What is it?" Velaria shook her head. "I don't know. I've never seen anything like this before." Dr. Pittel joined them, his scientific curiosity piqued. He examined the crystals closely, scanning them with a portable device. "These are emitting low levels of geothermal energy. If we can harvest them, they might be a sustainable heat source." "That's great," Sarah said, overhearing the conversation. "We could use something reliable in this frozen wasteland." Marcus, however, remained skeptical. "We don't know if it's safe. Could be radioactive or something worse." Patel shook his head. "The readings are clean. No signs of radiation. This could be the break we need." Velaria watched as the humans debated their next steps. She had seen her share of the planet's natural wonders, but nothing like this. For the first time, she wondered if Exon 5 held secrets even her people hadn't uncovered. A test of trust. As the storm raged outside, the group worked together to make the cavern livable. Velaria showed them how to use the glowing crystals to create light and warmth, while Sarah rigged a makeshift heater from their salvaged supplies. The humans' ability to adapt impressed Velaria, but she couldn't shake the nagging fear that their luck would eventually run out. That fear was realized when a distant rumble echoed through the cavern. Aiden stood, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. What was that? Valeria's eyes widened in alarm. "It's the ice shifting. This cavern might not be stable." No sooner had she spoken than the ground beneath them trembled. Cracks began to form in the walls, and chunks of ice fell from the ceiling. The group scrambled to gather their supplies, their panic mounting. "Everyone out," Aiden shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Velaria led the way, her nimble movements allowing her to navigate the treacherous terrain quickly. The humans followed as best they could, slipping and stumbling on the unstable ground. Just as they reached the entrance, a deafening crack split the air, and a massive chunk of ice collapsed behind them, sealing off the cavern. The group stood outside in the storm, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The snow had lightened, but the temperature was still dangerously low. Aiden turned to Velaria, his expression both grateful and grim. "You saved us again, but we're back to square one." Velaria nodded, her resolve hardening. "The springs are still our best chance. We'll make it. Together." Hope on the horizon. As dawn broke, the group continued their journey, their spirits bolstered by their narrow escape. The sight of the thermal springs in the distance filled them with renewed determination. Steam rose from the bubbling pools, and the ground around them was free of snow, a rare oasis in the frozen wasteland. When they finally reached the springs, Velaria stepped forward, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and pride. "We made it." Aiden placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm but kind. "Thanks to you." As the humans set up camp, Velaria watched them with a newfound sense of purpose. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was part of something greater. Together, they were more than their individual strengths, more than the sum of their fears. Together, they had hope. The battle for survival. The night deepened, and the camp remained on high alert. The thermal spring's warmth provided little comfort as the howling wind carried the distant calls of predators. Velaria sat near the fire, her violet eyes scanning the shadows. Every sound, every flicker of movement set her on edge. The humans around her worked tirelessly, repairing the damage to the barriers and fortifying their defenses. Their determination was unwavering, despite the fear etched into their faces. Aiden Cross paced the perimeter, his weapon at the ready. His crew looked to him for guidance, but even he couldn't mask the weight of their situation. They were stranded on a hostile planet, surrounded by creatures that viewed them as prey. Yet Aiden refused to let despair take hold. He approached Velaria, his voice low but steady. "We need a plan, something more than just waiting for the next attack." Velaria nodded, her mind racing. Her people had survived on Exon 5 for centuries before their evacuation, relying on knowledge passed down through generations. She shared what she knew with Aiden and his crew, describing the patterns of the predators, their weaknesses, and the tools that could be fashioned from the environment. Her words sparked a flicker of hope among the humans, and they set to work immediately. Jonah and Sarah focused on creating traps, using the bioluminescent plants as bait to lure the predators into pitfalls lined with sharp rocks. Marcus and Elise reinforced the barriers, embedding shards of ice and stone to make them harder to breach. Velaria guided them, her familiarity with the planet's resources proving invaluable. Even Malik, the medic, contributed by crafting repellents from the local alga, their pungent scent designed to keep the creatures at bay. Hours passed, and exhaustion weighed heavily on the group, but they pressed on. Each small victory, a completed trap, a fortified barrier, bolstered their resolve. Velaria found herself marveling at their resilience. The humans were unlike her own people, who would have abandoned the fight long ago. These strangers had come together, their individual strengths combining into something formidable. It was a kind of unity she had never experienced, and it stirred something deep within her. As dawn approached, the first test of their efforts came. The ground trembled as a pack of predators approached the camp. Their glowing eyes pierced the darkness, and their guttural growls sent shivers down spines. The humans took their positions, weapons drawn, ready for the onslaught. The traps worked better than expected. One of the creatures fell into a pit, its snarls echoing as it struggled against the jagged rocks. Another was repelled by the pungent algae, retreating with a frustrated roar. But the rest of the pack was undeterred, launching themselves at the barriers with relentless ferocity. Aiden's leadership shone as he barked orders, coordinating the crew's efforts. Velaria fought alongside them, wielding her spear with surprising precision. Her fear gave way to determination as she defended the camp, her strikes fueled by the realization that these humans had become her allies, her unlikely family. The battle raged on, and the humans' teamwork proved critical. Marcus's sharpshooting kept the creatures at bay, while Sarah and Jonah worked to repair the barriers as fast as they were breached. Elise fought with a ferocity that rivaled the predators, her blades flashing in the dim light. Malik tended to injuries swiftly, his calm demeanor a steadying presence amid the chaos. Finally, As the first rays of light broke over the horizon, the predators retreated, their growls fading into the distance. The camp fell silent, save for the labored breaths of the survivors. Aiden lowered his weapon, his gaze sweeping over the group. "Is everyone okay?" The crew nodded, their exhaustion evident but their spirits intact. Velaria leaned against a rock, her hands trembling as the adrenaline ebbed. She had never faced anything like this before, and yet she felt stronger for having done so. The humans had shown her what it meant to fight for survival, not just for oneself, but for each other. Aiden approached her, his expression a mix of gratitude and respect. "We couldn't have done this without you." Velaria met his gaze, her voice steady despite the fatigue. "We survived because we worked together. That's what matters." In the aftermath of the battle, the group began to rebuild, their bond stronger than ever. Velaria found herself embracing a new sense of purpose. These humans had given her something she thought she had lost forever: hope, and she was determined to help them find a way off Exon 5, no matter the cost. A glimmer of escape. The days following the Predator attack were grueling. The humans and Velaria worked tirelessly to improve their defenses, gather resources, and ensure the camp's survival. Though their immediate safety had been secured, the looming question of escape weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Aiden Cross, ever the pragmatic leader, had begun poring over the remains of their communication equipment, hoping for a solution. Velaria watched him from a distance, her own thoughts a tangled mix of hope and doubt. The humans had a remarkable ability to focus on the impossible, to find light in the darkest corners. It was a quality she admired, even envied. She approached Aiden as he hunched over the cracked device, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Any progress?" she asked. Aiden looked up, his expression grim but determined. "The signal's weak, but I think we can boost it. If we can find a high enough point, maybe we can send a distress call. Problem is, the mountains around here are treacherous." Velaria nodded, her mind already working. "There's a peak to the north. My people used to use it for signal relays. The climb is dangerous, but the view is clear for miles. If your equipment can work, it'll work there." Aiden considered her words, then glanced at the others. "We'll need a small team to make the climb. The rest will stay and protect the camp." Marcus, ever the stoic soldier, stepped forward. "I'll go. You'll need someone who can handle the rough terrain." "I'm in too," Sarah added. "I can make adjustments to the equipment on site if needed." Aiden turned to Velaria. "You know the path. Can you guide us?" Velaria hesitated for a moment, but the resolve in her chest grew. "Yes, I'll take you there." The decision made, the group prepared for the journey. Sarah worked with Jonah to stabilize the communication equipment, while Marcus gathered supplies. Velaria shared what she knew about the terrain, warning them of the risks they would face. By the time they set out, the group was as ready as they could be. The climb was brutal from the start. The icy wind bit at their exposed skin, and the unstable ground threatened to give way with every step. Velaria led the way, her knowledge of the terrain keeping them on the safest paths. Marcus followed close behind, his sharp eyes scanning for any sign of danger. Aiden and Sarah carried the equipment, their movements careful and deliberate. Hours passed, and the group's progress slowed as the terrain grew steeper. Velaria paused to catch her breath, her eyes scanning the horizon. "We're close," she said, pointing to a jagged peak that loomed ahead, just a little further. As they resumed the climb, the faint sound of growls reached their ears. Valeria's heart sank. The predators had followed them. She turned to Aiden, her voice urgent. "We need to move faster." The group quickened their pace, but the growls grew louder, echoing through the narrow mountain pass. Marcus took up the rear, his weapon at the ready. "They're closing in," he said grimly. Valeria's mind raced as she led them to a narrow ledge. "This way," she said, guiding them onto the precarious path. The predators couldn't follow here, their larger frames unable to navigate the tight space. The humans moved carefully, their breaths shallow as the drop below loomed threateningly. When they finally reached the summit, relief washed over them. The view was breathtaking, a vast expanse of white and silver stretching to the horizon. Sarah wasted no time setting up the communication equipment, her fingers deftly adjusting the damaged components. Aiden and Marcus kept watch, their weapons trained on the path they had climbed. Velaria stood at the edge of the peak, her eyes scanning the horizon. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. If the signal worked, if help came, they might actually survive this. Sarah's voice broke the silence. "It's ready. Let's hope someone's listening." Aiden activated the device, his voice calm but firm. "This is Captain Aiden Cross of the Earth vessel Resolute. We are stranded on Exon 5. Our coordinates are..." He relayed the information, repeating the message several times before turning to the others. Now we wait. The group remained on the summit for hours, the cold biting at their resolve. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Valeria's heart sank. What if no one heard them? What if help never came? She glanced at Aiden, who sat silently, his expression unreadable. "Do you think it'll work?" she asked softly. Aiden looked at her, his gaze steady. "If there's one thing I've learned, it's that you never stop trying. As long as we're alive, there's hope." His words resonated with Velaria, igniting a spark of determination within her. She had come this far with these humans, faced dangers she never thought she could survive. She wasn't ready to give up. As the first stars appeared in the sky, the device crackled to life. A voice, faint but clear, came through the static. "This is the Earth Frigate Dawnstar. We've received your distress signal. Hang tight. We're on our way." Relief swept through the group, and for the first time in days, smiles broke across their faces. Aiden clapped Marcus on the back, while Sarah let out a whoop of joy. Velaria felt a lump in her throat as she realized what this meant. They had done it. Against all odds, they had found a way to escape. The journey back to camp was treacherous, but the hope of rescue buoyed their spirits. Velaria walked beside Aiden, her steps lighter despite the icy ground. "You were right," she said quietly. "There's always hope." Aiden smiled, his eyes reflecting the faint glow of the auroras above. "And we'll make sure you see what it's like to live with it." Their bond had been forged in the harshest of circumstances, but it was stronger than any storm Exon 5 could throw at them. Together, they would face whatever came next. The final trial. The message from the Earth Frigate Dawnstar had reignited a sense of purpose in the group. Back at the camp, the humans worked with renewed vigor, preparing for the arrival of their rescuers. Velaria watched them with a mixture of relief and trepidation. Though rescue seemed imminent, the harshness of Exon 5 had taught her not to celebrate too soon. Aiden stood near the fire, discussing plans with Sarah and Marcus. "We need to make the landing zone as visible as possible. If a storm rolls in, it'll be hard for them to pinpoint our location." Sarah nodded, her mind already racing through ideas. "We can use the bioluminescent plants to create markers. They're bright enough to be seen from above." Marcus added, "And we'll need to clear the area around the spring. The predators won't make this easy." Velaria stepped forward, her voice steady. "I can help. There's a plateau near the spring, flat and open. It's the safest place for a ship to land." Aiden gave her a grateful nod. "Good. Let's move fast. The Dawnstar won't wait forever." The group divided tasks, each member contributing their skills to the effort. Velaria led a team to the plateau, where they began clearing debris and marking the area with glowing plants. The humans worked with remarkable efficiency, their trust in Valeria's guidance evident in every step. As the hours passed, the camp buzzed with activity. Malik prepared supplies for the injured, while Elise and Jonah reinforced the barriers in case the predators returned. Velaria found herself in awe of their unity. She had spent so much of her life believing in the strength of the individual, yet here was a living example of collective resilience. As night fell, the camp stood ready. The plateau glowed with the light of the plants, a beacon in the endless dark. Aiden called the group together, his voice steady but firm. "We're almost there. Stay alert. If the predators show up, we hold them off until the Dawnstar arrives." The group nodded, their expressions resolute. Velaria tightened her grip on her spear, her heart pounding. She had come to care for these humans, their survival intertwined with her own. She wouldn't let them down. The first signs of trouble came in the form of distant growls. The sound carried through the still air, growing louder with each passing moment. Valeria's stomach twisted as she spotted movement in the shadows. The predators had returned, and they were not alone. A pack of the creatures emerged, their glowing eyes reflecting the light from the plateau. They moved with lethal precision, their jagged claws glinting in the faint glow. Aiden raised his weapon, his voice calm but commanding. "Hold your ground. Aim for their eyes." The battle began with a roar. The predators charged, their massive forms slamming into the barriers with terrifying force. Aiden and Marcus opened fire, their shots lighting up the night. Velaria moved with surprising agility, her spear striking true as she fought alongside the humans. The traps set earlier proved invaluable. Several predators fell into hidden pits, their snarls of frustration echoing through the air. Jonah and Elise worked to hold the line, their movements synchronized as they fended off the attackers. Malik moved swiftly between the group, tending to injuries with practiced efficiency. Despite their efforts, the predators were relentless. One broke through the barriers, its claws swiping dangerously close to Sarah. Velaria acted on instinct, lunging forward and driving her spear into the creature's side. It let out a deafening roar before collapsing, its body still. Aiden glanced at Velaria, his expression a mix of gratitude and admiration. "Nice work." She nodded, her breath coming in sharp bursts. "We're not done yet." As the battle raged on, a new sound filled the air, a low hum that grew steadily louder. Valeria's heart leaped as she realized what it was. The Dawnstar was approaching. The ship's lights cut through the darkness, illuminating the plateau. The predators hesitated, their growls turning to uneasy whimpers. One by one, they retreated into the shadows, their instincts warning them of the greater threat. The humans cheered as the ship descended, its engines kicking up a whirlwind of snow and debris. Velaria shielded her eyes, her chest heaving with relief. Aiden motioned for the group to gather near the landing zone. "Move. This is our chance." As the Dawnstar touched down, its ramp extended, and a group of armored figures emerged. They moved with practiced precision, weapons at the ready as they secured the area. One of them, a tall woman with a commanding presence, approached Aiden. "Captain Cross, we're here to get you out." Aiden nodded, his expression both relieved and determined. "We've got survivors and injured. Help us get them on board." The rescue team worked swiftly, guiding the group onto the ship. Velaria hesitated at the edge of the ramp, her gaze lingering on the icy expanse she had called home. Aiden noticed her pause and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Come on, Velaria. You're one of us now." Her heart swelled at his words, and she stepped onto the ship, her past and present colliding in that single moment. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe in a future, one filled with warmth, hope, and possibility. As the Dawnstar lifted off, Velaria gazed out at Exon 5, the planet that had both tested and defined her. The humans had given her a chance she never thought possible, and she vowed to honor it. Together, they had survived the impossible, and now they were finally free. A new horizon. As the Dawnstar ascended through Exon 5's frozen atmosphere, the battered crew of the Resolute finally allowed themselves to breathe. The hum of the ship's engines and the warm, controlled air inside felt like a reprieve after the chaos they had endured. Velaria sat quietly by a viewport, her violet eyes fixed on the planet below. The icy expanse stretched endlessly, its jagged mountains and glowing fissures now distant memories. Aiden Cross approached her, his expression soft. "You okay?" he asked, leaning against the frame of the viewport. Velaria nodded slowly, though her gaze didn't leave the window. "I've never left Exxon 5 before. It feels strange." Aiden smiled, a hint of understanding in his eyes. "The first time I left Earth, I felt the same way. But out there," he gestured to the stars beyond, "there's so much more. New worlds, new people. You'll see." The words resonated with Velaria. For so long, her life had been defined by the icy confines of her home planet, by survival and isolation. Now, surrounded by these resilient humans, the universe seemed impossibly vast and full of promise. The rest of the crew busied themselves with medical checkups and debriefings. Sarah, ever the problem solver, was already discussing ways to repair their ship with the engineers aboard the Dawnstar. Marcus and Elise stood watchfully by the rescue team, their disciplined nature unyielding even in safety. Jonah regaled the medics with exaggerated tales of their exploits, his humor a welcome balm to the group's frayed nerves. Malik ensured everyone was accounted for, his calm presence a reminder of their hard-won survival. For Velaria, the humans' unity and determination were still astonishing. They had faced insurmountable odds, yet they had refused to falter. Their strength wasn't just physical, it was in their connections, their shared purpose. She marveled at how they embraced her as one of their own, despite the vast differences between them. The captain of the Dawnstar, Commander Elena Drake, entered the room and addressed Aiden and his crew. "We've reviewed your distress signal and the reports from my team. What you all endured on Exxon 5 is nothing short of extraordinary." Her sharp, commanding tone softened slightly as she glanced at Velaria. "And it seems you've gained an unexpected ally." Aiden nodded. "We wouldn't have made it without Velaria. Her knowledge of the planet saved us more times than I can count." Elena studied Velaria, her expression thoughtful. "You're welcome aboard the Dawnstar. We'll take you to a station where you can rest and decide what's next for you." Velaria hesitated, the weight of the commander's words sinking in. What was next for her? Her people had abandoned her, and Exxon 5 held nothing but memories of survival and solitude. Yet the thought of joining the humans, of exploring the stars alongside them, filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known. "I'd like to stay with them," she said finally, her voice steady, "if they'll have me." Aiden grinned. "We'd be lucky to have you." The crew's murmurs of agreement solidified her decision. For the first time, Velaria felt like she belonged, not because of what she could do, but because of who she was. As the Dawnstar prepared to dock at an orbital station, Velaria took one last look at Exxon 5. The planet that had once been her prison now seemed small and distant. She turned away from the window, her gaze now fixed on the humans around her, her new family. The station loomed ahead, its massive structure brimming with the promise of a new chapter. Velaria stepped off the ship with the others, her heart racing with anticipation. The universe was vast and unknown, but she wasn't afraid. With her newfound companions, she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. For Velaria and the crew of the Resolute, the trials of Exxon 5 were only the beginning. Together, they would forge a path through the stars, their shared resilience a testament to the strength of unity and the boundless possibilities of the cosmos.